This week on Vatican Connections, we take a look at what context the Pope is stepping into as he visits Egypt. The Catholic bishops of Ontario had their Ad Limina visit this week, and we talk about what it's like to be in Rome during the Easter season with Zenit correspondent Deborah Castellano Lubov.
Hello and welcome to Vatican Connections. I'm Emily Callan. Some of you might have heard of the TED Talks before. Well, TED, a non-profit organization whose mission is to spread ideas worth sharing, asked Pope Francis to give one of these talks Tuesday evening from the Vatican. He gave an 18-minute speech on the theme of their annual conference, The Future You, which took place in Vancouver. His appearance at the conference was a huge surprise to participants, and it was certainly the first time a pontiff was a speaker at a TED conference. So here's just a clip from the Pope's talk.
Il terzo e ultimo messaggio che vorrei condividere oggi riguarda proprio la rivoluzione della tenerezza. Che cos'è la tenerezza? È l'amore che si fa vicino e concreto. È un movimento che parte dal cuore e arriva agli occhi, alle orecchie, alle mani. Sì, la tenerezza è la strada che hanno percorso gli uomini e le donne più coraggiosi e forti. Non è debolezza la tenerezza, è fortezza. È la strada della solidarietà, la strada dell'umiltà. Permettetemi di dirlo chiaramente, quanto più sei potente, quanto più le tue azioni hanno un impatto sulla gente, tanto più sei chiamato a essere umile. Perché altrimenti il potere ti rovina e tu rovinerai gli altri. In Argentina si diceva che il potere è come il gin preso a digiuno, ti fa girare la testa, ti fa ubriacare, ti fa perdere l'equilibrio e ti porta a fare del male a te stesso e agli altri, se non lo metti insieme all'umiltà e alla tenerezza. Con l'umiltà e l'amore concreto, invece, il potere, il più alto, il più forte, diventa servizio e diffonde il bene.
The Council of Nine held their 19th meeting over the course of 3 days this week, where they continued their discussion on the reform of the Curia. Director of the Vatican Press Office, Greg Burke, explained at the conclusion of their meetings what topics the cardinals focused on this time. Namely, he said, matters surrounding the office for the new evangelization and evangelization of peoples. He proposed texts from the Council on interreligious dialogue, on legislative texts, and from 3 Vatican tribunals. They also spoke about the formation of personnel working for the Holy See, as well as the relationship between the bishops' conferences and the Roman Curia. Finally, an update was given on the Secretariat for the Economy and the Commission for the Protection of Minors, specifically on programs of global education. Pope Francis gave a long speech to participants of an international congress for Catholic Action on Thursday. Catholic Action is an international forum dedicated to missionary discipleship at the parish level. It is celebrating its 150th anniversary. About 300 people were participating in the event. The theme of their congress was Catholic Action is Mission with All and for All. The meeting took place in the Synod Hall at the Vatican. In Spanish, the Pope recalled the movement's vocation to go out to those in need, those who are far from the Church, and to invite people to renew their commitment to evangelization. The Pope also received members of the Papal Foundation at the Vatican on Thursday. It was founded in 1988 in the United States. Its purpose is to support the work of the Holy Father in the world through charitable donations. In an address to the foundation, Pope Francis was grateful for their support towards so many religious and charitable causes close to the heart of the Pope, he said. Their work spreads hope and fosters unity and peace. He gave them his apostolic blessing and asked for prayers. The Catholic bishops of Ontario had an audience with Pope Francis this week as well. They were in Rome for their Ad Limina visit, a visit normally completed every 5 years to the Bishop of Rome. It's also an opportunity to pray at the tomb of St. Peter, which they did on their first day, and have meetings with different Vatican offices. Though this usually happens every 5 years, their last Ad Limina visit was in 2006, and they were the third group of Canadian bishops to go to Rome this year. So, on Tuesday, 21 Ontario bishops were received by the Holy Father at the Vatican. Topics and concerns they discussed with him touched upon immigration, the Church's relations with Indigenous communities in Canada, Christian persecution in other parts of the world, and medically assisted suicide in Canada. Last weekend, Pope Francis presided a special Mass in honor of modern-day martyrs. It was celebrated at the Basilica of St. Bartholomew. The shrine is already dedicated to the memory of martyrs, something John Paul II requested in 1999. During the liturgy, Pope Francis heard the testimonies of several relatives of these martyrs who were being honored for their heroic witness in the face of hatred. The Pope spoke off the cuff during his homily and said, "What the Church needs today are martyrs and witnesses, those everyday saints, those saints of an ordinary life lived with coherence. But it also needs those who have the courage to accept the grace of being witnesses to the end, to the point of death," he continued. All those who are the living blood of the Church are witnesses that Jesus is risen, that Jesus lives. At the end of his homily, the Holy Father blessed the 6 chapels found inside the Basilica, each one of them dedicated to martyrs of the 20th and 21st century.
The word martyr is an old English word derived from the Greek martyr or martus, which means witness. It was used by the first apostles to describe a person who was a witness of Christ's public life. But at that time, being a witness for Christ meant risking punishment and even death. Early on in Christian literature, the term began to be used to refer almost exclusively to those who died for the faith.
In the Pope's agenda this week is his apostolic trip to Egypt. He departed this morning from Rome and is spending 2 days in Egypt's capital, Cairo. This trip is symbolic. It is pastoral, ecumenical, and interreligious. He goes only a few weeks after a terrorist attack on 2 Coptic churches on Palm Sunday, and there were questions about the Pope's security. Matteo Cioffi sheds light on this question and what context the Pope is stepping into.
Greg Burke, director of the Holy See Press Office, affirmed the Pope's will to send out a positive message. He is serene and not naive because he knows the situation in Egypt. Burke told Vatican Radio he knows what happened to the Copts in the past years. He will use a normal covered car, but there will be 2 moments when he will use the golf car during the final Saturday Mass and at the seminary. Following the double attack on the Coptic churches of Alexandria and Tanta on Palm Sunday, killing more than 40 people and having nearly 100 wounded, there was concern surrounding the Pope's trip. The Holy Father, however, maintained his decision to go to Egypt and sent a clear message that the Pope desires to be close to the Christian brother of the Eastern Church. This visit has 3 goals. First, it's pastoral. He is there to encourage the small community of Catholics present in Egypt. Second, it is an ecumenical one. He intends to meet the leader of the Coptic Orthodox Church, Pope Tawadros II, and show that unity exists between Christians. Finally, it's an interreligious trip since he will be speaking at an international conference on peace and meeting the Grand Imam of the Al-Azhar University. Out of nearly 90 million inhabitants, 89% are Sunni Muslim, 10% are Christian Orthodox, and less than 1% is Catholic of varying rites. Pope Francis is therefore announcing himself as a messenger of peace. At the same time, the presence of the ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I also means to bring Christians together and their testimony of unity as a sign for peace in the world. The nuncio to Egypt, Monsignor Bruno Musarò, spoke of the great enthusiasm of the Egyptians for this visit, including Orthodox and Muslim. Musarò added that some of the pontiff's gestures, such as the washing of the feet of prisoners or disabled people on Holy Thursday, are very powerful actions that go to the heart of the people, especially if they belong to the other religions, as it just happened in Egypt recently. It is his first visit to the country, but his second one on the African continent. The trip took place in November 2015. This is also his fourth trip to a country whose population is mainly Muslim. He has been to Jordan, Turkey, and Azerbaijan.
The Pope is in Egypt as a messenger of peace. And just a few days before he landed in Cairo, the Holy Father sent a video message to the Egyptian people, especially to those who were impatiently awaiting his arrival. Here is an excerpt from that message recorded on Monday.
Desidero che questa visita sia un abbraccio di consolazione e di incoraggiamento a tutti i cristiani del Medio Oriente. Un messaggio di amicizia e di stima a tutti gli abitanti dell'Egitto e della regione. Un messaggio di fraternità e di riconciliazione a tutti i figli di Abramo, particolarmente al mondo islamico, in cui l'Egitto occupa un posto di primo piano. Auspico che sia anche un valido contributo al dialogo interreligioso con il mondo islamico e al dialogo ecumenico con la venerata e amata Chiesa copto-ortodossa. Il nostro mondo, dilaniato dalla violenza cieca che ha colpito anche il cuore della vostra cara terra, ha bisogno di pace, di amore e di misericordia. Ha bisogno di operatori di pace e di persone libere e liberatrici, di persone coraggiose che sanno imparare dal passato per costruire il futuro senza chiudersi nei pregiudizi. Ha bisogno di costruttori di ponti di pace, di dialogo, di fratellanza, di giustizia e di umanità.
We will have more on the Holy Father's apostolic voyage to Egypt in next week's show. Now, last week I gave you a rundown of the Easter celebrations at the Vatican. There were certainly many, but what is it like to be in Rome during Easter time? And since we're still in the Easter season, Deborah Castellano Lubov, Vatican correspondent for Zenit, is back on the show today, and she explains to us what makes this time of the year at the Vatican so unique. Hi, Deborah. Welcome to the show, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Emily. It's my pleasure.
First of all, in Rome, what happens around Easter? Tell us about what it's like over there.
It's a beautiful time here. It really is. Spring is in full force. It's beautiful climate. There's a lot of tourists and pilgrims from all over the world. And the whole Easter week is really jam-packed. But there's a lot of little traditions too. Well, for instance, let me speak about Holy Thursday. During Holy Week, one could say that we reenact the steps of Christ. And for instance, on Holy Thursday night, in which there's the Mass in Cena Domini, which is kind of representative of Christ's Last Supper. in some way, we kind of follow him to keep watch in Gethsemane. It may seem a little confusing what I'm saying, but what I mean is that after the Mass, the churches in Rome are kept open late, and it's a tradition that the faithful then visit various churches, and inside the churches, the main altars are stripped, but there's a smaller altar where the Eucharistic presence is, and we go and we pray in generally 7 churches at these smaller altars, beautifully kept with white flowers and candles. And then at night, representing the arrest of Jesus, the Eucharistic presence is removed, and then all the altars are kept dark until Easter Sunday or the Easter Vigil, obviously. And then in Italy itself, there's so many traditions, because there's even the Stations of the Cross that many communities from north to southern Italy, each in their own way, they reenact. So with a lot of passion, and they have a very theatrical spirit here. So it's really beautifully done. And that's another thing that I wanted to mention. Then, of course, the gastronomic traditions in Italy, of course, the food traditions, that always would be of interest. Lamb is basically in every household throughout the country. And then, as I mentioned before, there's this tradition of the chocolate Easter eggs that, especially the children, you see them, well, after Easter, you still see the stores full of these huge chocolate Easter eggs, because it's a very family tradition. It's the sweet side of the religious holiday, but everything's done with a great sense of devotion here. And it's really something, as a Catholic, as a Christian, being in the center of our faith is really just such a moving, beautiful experience.
What are some of the traditions at the Vatican or in Rome around Holy Week, aside from the masses and the rites and the celebrations?
Absolutely. And there's actually 2 that I would like to mention up front. One is the Via Crucis, the Way of the Cross, that takes place in the famous Colosseum in Rome. And many may not know this, but the Colosseum was actually consecrated by Pope Benedict XIV to Christian martyrs in the 1700s. And then the first time the Via Crucis had taken place was in the 1700s, around 1750, when there was a jubilee. So right now, what happens on Good Friday in Rome is conserving that memory. There was a pause over the years. It resumed around 1925. And since 1964 with Paul VI was when, for the first time, popes consistently were always present for this tradition, in which the faithful gather to hear the stations, and they carry a cross for each of the stations, and then eventually to the Pope, who says a prayer at the end off the cuff. So this tradition brings together thousands in Rome on Good Friday evening, and this year it did the same. And at the end, Pope Francis gave a lovely prayer, and with this tradition, the meditations are always written by someone else every year, someone in the church or by someone, a cultural person who's known that the Pope selects. And this year it was by Marianne Pelletier, who won the Ratzinger Prize, a woman, a French biblicist. So it was very nice. And the other tradition that I would like to mention is the tradition of the the Dutch flowers for the Easter Sunday Mass, which actually has about 35,000 flowers and plants come to St. Peter's Square. And it takes about a week for the whole process to happen, because they come with a truck and a trailer from Holland with the thousands of flowers. And then on Holy Saturday, they assemble everything, and everyone can enjoy from home or in the square, but at home through the television, they could see the beautiful flower display. And then afterward, all the flowers remain there until Wednesday after, but then they're gifted to monasteries and religious institutions in Rome.
So although no pope has ever touched the liturgy, is there something the Pope has done that's new, that he's brought to Easter at the Vatican?
Yes, he has, because even though he's never touched the liturgy, when we speak about the Mass in Cena Domini, the Last Supper Mass, while his predecessors had always celebrated in St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis has decided to go out. The Pope of going to the peripheries, of going out. So basically, this actually goes back to when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, because he used to do the same. He used to go to hospices, he used to go to the hospitals, to the prisons. And now, as a successor of St. Peter, he does the same on Holy Thursday in Rome. He did not celebrate the Mass in St. Peter's, but at places of suffering. And he also does the washing of the feet. So for instance, he goes to, when he first was elected Pope, the first year he had went to a juvenile detention center. Then in the years that followed, a place for the disabled, then another year, Rabibia prison. Last year, it was a facility that hosted refugees. And this year, he went again to a prison, Paliano prison, a bit outside of Rome, that has many incarcerated there who were involved in mafia-related crimes, etc. And during the off-the-cuff speech that the Pope gave, he spoke about how God loved to the end despite what we've done, and it was very moving.
What struck you most from the homilies and addresses? What did you find most significant?
I think the whole idea of resurrection that was so pervasive in all of the Pope's discourses, certainly on Easter Day, it was significant because generally the Pope does not necessarily give a homily during the Easter Mass. He does give a homily during the Easter Vigil, but this year he decided to give one off the cuff, and he spoke about the resurrection, and that actually he insisted that the resurrection is not a fantasy and that we need to take it seriously. And between that homily and even from the night before, he really emphasized the point that our buried hopes, the areas where we're down, the areas where anyone is suffering, we should look to the Lord to rise up and restore our dignity. And also, in addition to the homilies, there's the Urbi et Orbi blessing, and that takes place from the loggia on Easter Day after the Easter Mass. And also the next day at the Easter Monday Regina Coeli address, the Pope spoke a lot about persecuted Christians and their suffering at this time.
Deborah, again, it was a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Emily. It's always my pleasure.
Lord, bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction.
And that's all for our show this week. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them via Vatican Connections Twitter page at VatiConnections. I'll be happy to answer them on our next episode. And if you are new to the show or a returning viewer, we at Salt and Light value your feedback on the content we produce. If you would like to tell us how we're doing, please visit saltandlighttv.org/VC survey to send us your comments directly to our programming team. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week on Vatican Connections.